Welcome to The Explainer. So today we're diving into a book called Flat Earth for Dummies, 101. Yep, you heard that right. It's a guide that really challenges, one of the most basic things we think we know about our world. So let's jump in and see what the argument is all about. Right at the start, the book hits you with this quote from Schopenhauer. And the whole point is pretty clear, right? It's saying that ideas we laugh at today might just be tomorrow's common sense. It's basically the book's way of saying, hey, keep an open mind because things are about to get weird. Okay, so right off the bat, we've got two different ideas clashing. On one side, you've got the globe model we all learned in school. But on the other, there's the flat Earth thesis, this idea that the Earth is actually a flat, still plane, and the sun and moon are the ones moving above us. So let's see how the book actually tries to back this up. Okay, let's get into the first part, challenging the globe. So before the book even tries to build up its own theory, it's got to tear down the one we're all familiar with. And it starts with the most fundamental piece of evidence for a globe, the curvature of the Earth. So the book's first big swing is aimed squarely at Earth's curvature. The claim is that the math just doesn't line up with what our eyes and our cameras can see. For example, look at this sailboat. It has a 15-foot mast and it's 5 miles out. According to the standard math, that mast should be about 1.5 feet, almost 2 feet, below the horizon. But the book argues, if you grab a good camera with a strong zoom, you can see the whole thing, clear as day. And this is presented as Exhibit A that, well, maybe there's no curve to begin with. And it's not just boats. To really blow this idea up, the book uses the Statue of Liberty as an example. It says you can spot her from 60 miles out. Now, if you run the numbers with that same curvature formula, she should be totally invisible, hidden behind more than 2,000 feet of curved water. That's a huge discrepancy. Then, to add some weight, they pull out this quote from Albert Einstein. And the line of reasoning here is interesting. It's basically, if a genius like Einstein says we can't even detect the Earth's motion optically, then how on earth can we be so sure we're seeing its curve? The book kind of ties these two things together, saying they're both just assumptions of the globe model that you can't actually prove you're seeing. So if we're supposed to believe there's no curve, then what is the alternative? That's what brings us to Section 2, a new world map. This is where the book stops tearing things down and starts building its own version of reality. And this is really the million-dollar question, isn't it? If we're not living on a spinning ball, then what exactly does this world look like? What's the layout? Well, here's the map they propose. In this view, the world is a flat, circular plane. And you'll notice the North Pole is smack dab in the middle, and all the continents are kind of fanned out from there. And this is where things get really different. Forget what you know about Antarctica being a continent at the bottom of the world. In this model, it's a giant ice wall, hundreds of feet high, that forms a perimeter around the entire disk. It's basically the container that holds all the oceans in. Okay, so if we're not on a spinning ball, what keeps us from floating away? This is where the book completely rewrites the physics textbook. It says, forget gravity. The force that holds everything down isn't gravity, it's electromagnetism. And you can see how that plays out here with magnetism. The globe model says magnetism comes from a molten core. But in the flat Earth model, the entire world is like a massive ring magnet. The North Pole is the positive center, and the South Pole, well, it's not a pole at all. It's the entire outer ice wall acting as the negative perimeter. So you're probably thinking, okay, if there's a giant ice wall, how come nobody's just gone and checked it out? Well, the book has an answer for that. It points to the Antarctic Treaty System. It claims this isn't about science or protecting penguins, it's a global conspiracy to prevent anyone from getting near the edge and discovering the truth. All right, moving on to Section 3. Just when you thought it couldn't get any wilder, the model adds another huge piece to the puzzle. It's not just a flat disk. The book says we are living inside a giant, solid dome, like a snow globe with an unbreakable ceiling over our heads. And to back this up, the book reframes some pretty big moments in history. It suggests that Operation High Jump back in '46 wasn't just an expedition. It was when Admiral Byrd first bumped into this dome. And then you have those high-altitude nuke tests in the '60s. The book claims that was us literally trying to see how strong the dome was, which all leads to the Apollo program, which, in this view, had to be a hoax because getting through that dome was impossible. The book makes this point that sometimes the truth is hidden in plain sight. It points to the actual name of that nuclear test program, Operation Fishbowl, and it suggests that's a little inside joke, right? A wink and a nod from the people who know we're all just swimming around in a giant enclosed bowl. Okay, so an ice wall? A giant dome? I mean, if any of this is true, it would have to be the biggest secret in human history.
And that brings us to our last section, the Great Deception. This is where the book explains how a secret this big could possibly be kept.
Because that dome, it creates a massive problem for the history books. If you can't get out, then what about space travel? More specifically, what about the crowning achievement of the 20th century, the Apollo moon landing?
Well, the book's answer is pretty direct. It says the moon landing was faked. The whole thing. A massive, elaborate production staged right here on Earth. And why? To win the Cold War. To score a huge propaganda victory over the Soviets without ever actually having to leave the fishbowl. And the proof it offers is a list of all those classic questions people have been asking for decades. You know the ones. Why does the flag look like it's waving with no air? Where are all the stars in the photos? How can you have multiple shadow directions from one sun? The book says these aren't just goofs. They're telltale signs of a movie set. There's also a more technical argument it brings up, based on material science. Just look at this table. You've got the melting points for aluminum, steel, the stuff the spacecraft was made of. And then you have the temperatures in the thermosphere, over 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The book's point is brutally simple. The materials couldn't survive the trip. The spacecraft should have basically melted.
And then it points to what it calls a huge contradiction coming from NASA itself. You see, NASA today talks about how dangerous the Van Allen radiation belts are, and what a major hurdle they are for sending people deep into space. So the book asks a simple question. How did we solve that problem in the 1960s with computers less powerful than a calculator, but now, with all our modern tech, we've somehow lost that knowledge?
And this is where the whole theory gets really, really dark. The book even re-examines the Apollo 1 fire. It doesn't just say it was a tragic accident. It raises the possibility that it was sabotage, a way to silence Gus Grissom, one of the astronauts who died, because he'd been very critical of the whole program. So in the end, the book doesn't really give you a neat conclusion. Instead, it leaves you with this question taken straight from the movie The Truman Show. And really, that's the whole point of the book, isn't it? To make you ask, how much of what we believe is true, and how much is just the reality we've been presented with? And that is the central thesis of Flat Earth for Dummies 101. Thanks for tuning in to this explainer.